Hi everyone, Bindu here from Crafty Meraki. Before we start with today's projects, I want to share with you the Crafty Meraki website, and I want to show you how easy it is to find things on our website. So on our website, you click on collections, and that brings you to this page where you can see that all the brands that we carry are listed here in alphabetical order. Not only are the brands listed, but as you can see, dyes, distress inks, basically categories, ink cubes, inks, they're listed by brands as well as by categories. So say you're looking for distress inks, you can just go directly to distress inks and buy the distress inks that you're looking for. Oh, and what's this here today? We have a special collection created that has all the products that I'm going to be using in today's demo. So it's clearly called SSBE Demo Products. So you can just go to collections, find SSBE Demo Products, and you can just shop for all the products that I'm going to be using in today's demo. I will also give you the link to the collection, so it's easier to find that way as well. Be sure to check out the blog section of the website as well, because the design team shares daily inspiration in this section. In addition to the pictures of their projects, the design team also shares the process that they use to create that card. For today's demo, I have a twofer. So we're going to die cut once, but we're going to be making 2 cards with the die cuts. We're going to be playing with this 𝐒𝐬𝐧𝐧𝐞 shadow word die, which cuts out 3 pieces. I die cut the word 𝐒𝐬𝐧 from a bunch of different scraps that I had, all in rainbow color, rainbow order, rainbow color. And as you can see, this die cuts out, it's 1 piece, but it cuts out 2 different die cuts. One is the word 𝐒𝐬𝐧, and the other is the shadow for the word 𝐒𝐬𝐧. The word 𝐒𝐬𝐧 from pink, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet colored cardstock. So as I mentioned, we're going to be making 2 cards with these word die cuts. So all I'm doing is I'm separating the words and I'm separating the shadow words from my die cut pieces. So I have them all separated here, ready for my next step. For my next step, I am starting in the reverse rainbow order. So instead of starting with red or pink, I'm starting with the violet, and I'm going to stack these word die cuts one on top of the other, slightly offset. And I'll show you what I mean here in a minute. I am simply applying a tiny little bit of glue onto the violet or the purple die cut, and I am going to stack indigo cardstock on top of this violet. So like I said, I am gluing these word die cuts slightly offset. What I'm doing is I'm leaving about 1/8 of an inch gap when I glue the words together so that the bottom layer is actually visible and it's not completely hidden by the top layer. But as we keep building more layers, you will see the difference, and that's how the rainbow color is visible when we offset these die cuts when we stack them. So I'm continuing down the reverse rainbow order. I've glued together violet, indigo, and blue, and I'm going to continue with the other 4 colors. So you can see here already with the 4 layers, you can see the bottom layers peeking through slightly, and that's all I mean by offset. I'm going to finish gluing the remaining colors in exactly the same way. Also, I am going to do the exact same thing with the shadow word. I'm gluing them all together in the reverse rainbow order, but I have them slightly offset once again. And this is what they look like when you're done gluing them and stacking slightly offset. So now I'm moving on to the next step. This is where we make $1 million difference in the final end result of our cards. We already stepped up our die cuts when we stack them slightly offset. We're even going to go another step further and heat emboss our die cuts. What you see me doing here is I have purple tape, regular purple tape, and I am putting up the sticky side up, and I made myself a little leverage, if you will. I folded the tape so that I'm easily able to hold it and my fingers don't get sticky. I am also taking this purple tape and I put it on top of my 𝐂𝐤𝐬𝐿 Make Art Station, and I'm using my magnets to hold this tape in place. Now, here's where the magic happens. I am going to temporarily adhere my word die cut onto this purple tape. See how it's secure now? It's temporarily adhered. But this makes your life so much easier when you're trying to heat emboss something that you've already die cut. So you don't have a full A2 size panel that you can hold and you can maneuver and heat it up. So this makes it so much easier. My personal favorite trick of all time. I am taking next the 𝐬𝐢 embossing ink, and I'm gonna heat set it or heat emboss it using the Brutus Monroe Fairy Dust embossing ink. So now that we have our die cut secure, I have all my tools in place, and I'm gonna take the embossing ink directly onto the stacked word die cuts. All I'm doing is I'm making sure I get a good even ink coverage. And I've got my coffee filters, I've got my Tim Holtz craft pick, I've got all my tools ready. And now I'm ready to heat set this embossing powder that I'm gonna add on. So once you make sure you get a good even ink coverage on your die cuts, I am simply going to take the whole tape, put it in my coffee filter, and I'm gonna dump the fairy dust embossing powder onto the die cut. This is what I mean when I said it makes your life so much easier if you use this purple tape and just stick on your die cuts and use it to heat emboss. You can literally go to town with this. I also frequently get asked, what do you use the Make Art Station for? I cannot tell you how much I use this Make Art Station by 𝐂𝐤𝐬𝐿. You've probably seen me use this Make Art Station pretty much for every project that I make. When I'm watercoloring, when I'm heat embossing, I even use this grid marks on the Make Art Station. I use the magnetic ruler. I use all of those to align my sentiment. So when I want to get an even straight line, I simply add the ruler on top and I am ready to go. I can make sure that my sentiments are in a straight line. So back to this card here, what I'm doing is I am heat embossing. I brought my heat gun. It was nice and hot. I brought it directly to the die cut here on top of the Make Art Station. And because it was nice and hot, it got done in a minute. Now I'm ready to move on. So I'm going to repeat this step a couple of different times because I want to make sure that my die cuts are really nice and sparkly. I want to make sure that I get a really good coverage of the embossing powder on top of my die cuts. And I'm also going to do the same thing with the shadow word dies that we stacked the same way. So I did exactly the same thing. I took my purple tape, I added the stacked word on top of it, and I simply made sure that I got a good even coverage of the embossing ink, and I'm dumping on the embossing powder. I'll put this on my Make Art Station, and I'll bring my heat gun directly to this work surface here. Like I said, I use my Make Art Station for everything, including heat embossing die cuts. So I'm finishing off the heat embossing here. Again, I'm repeating the same steps. I have my word die cuts on the purple tape. I covered it with embossing ink, added some fairy dust embossing powder, and I'm just heat setting it, directly bringing the heat gun to the die cuts. Also, I am repeating the heat embossing process 3 times for each of the die cuts that we have. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to make sure that I get a really good sparkle. If you like to have not that much sparkle, maybe I went crazy, but if you don't like that much sparkle, you could definitely stop with just 1 coating of the embossing powder. But I did it 3 times per die cut. So the actual word die cut that we heat embossed earlier, I did it 3 times. I applied the ink, applied the embossing powder, heat set it, let it cool down for just like 5 seconds or so in between bringing the embossing powder again, and then apply the embossing ink again, and then bring the embossing powder back. So I just simply repeated this process 3 times per word die, just because I like the look of extra sparkle. I mean, who doesn't like extra sparkle? Who doesn't like glitter? So all I did was I repeated that process 3 times and we are good to go. So we are making 2 cards today. One card base will use the word die cut and the other card will use the shadow or the outline of the hugs word on the second card. So I'm just finishing up my heat embossing, and then we're gonna move on to actually making our card bases for both of these cards. I kept the card bases very, very simple because we have so much sparkle and so much dimension and color going on here. I just wanted to keep the card bases very simple. So now we're gonna make our card panel, and for that, I am using this stamp set called Wings of Hope, and I'm using the smaller butterfly from this stamp set to make a pattern paper for my card base. All I'm doing is I'm taking this stamp and I'm stamping it randomly directly on top of my card base using this Pink Fresh Studio gray ink. It's called Rocky Slope. I'm just using the gray ink and I'm stamping it randomly on top of my card panel, as you can see here. So here's our finished card panel for the first card. For the second panel, all I did was I did the same thing with a lavender ink from Pink Fresh Studios. So here's a look at the finished cards. They're both pretty much almost the same. I'll start with this one. This is the actual word that we die cut, and I stacked them slightly offset, and so that way this rainbow is visible. And you can also see the heat embossing that we did with all that sparkly embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. All I did here, as you saw me, was just basically took the butterfly stamp and then I just made my own pattern paper, made it, basically stamped it random, and finished off this card. This one is also almost exactly the same, except this one has the shadow word that we cut out at the same time using the same die cut, same die. And again, this is also stacked slightly offset, and also just glued it right on top of my card base after I randomly stamped this butterfly stamp on top of, directly on top of my card base. So I want to share with you some more examples of cards that I made using these word dies. Here's some cards. Again, it's a similar kind of a card that I made for Mother's Day, and it's exactly the same as this hugs card. However, for the shadow, I did the same thing with the heat embossing. For the word, I simply added some glossy accents on top of the word mom to give it a glossy look and give it some texture. And again, it's the same thing where I stamped an image, random image on the background of the card panel, and I simply added the rainbow offset word stacked together on top of the card. So really simple. You could almost call it a clean and simple card. But it's really, that's all there is to it. I just added some gems to it to finish off these two cards. But essentially, they're exactly the same as the cards that we made today. Here are some more cards that I made. Here's one that I made. It's almost, you can see a pattern here, all the gray stamping in the background. But here's another card which uses the same concept. However, in this card, I used a die cut inlay technique. So I did the same thing. I die cut the word hello using our hello shadow word die. And because it cuts out both the shadow and the word in one go, I was able to make two cards with die cutting 2 times. Once I used this rainbow watercolored panel, and I just, same thing, I just did the heat embossing using the Brutus Monroe fairy dust embossing powder. So I just stacked those die cuts and I did the inlay with the white die cut from the white cardstock. So, and the rest of the card is pretty simple. I just added a couple of gems here, but essentially it's made in the same exact way. Only difference being that the white is, the die cut inlay is die cut with white cardstock. Here's another example of a card I made. Once again, this one is even more simple. I didn't do any heat embossing. I just die cut the same thing twice, once with the rainbow watercolor panel. And then I did the word love inlaid with white cardstock, pretty much almost the same as this, minus the heat embossing. And the background, again, I kept it pretty simple. I just used the same stamp set that we used today, the Wings of Hope. And in this card, though, I used the larger butterfly image to stamp onto the card panel. So there's lots of options here, lots of choices, lots of things we could do. And again, here are some of the other words you could try this technique with. With Father's Day coming up, I'm going to make some more cards with this dad word here. Then we have the thanks. We have mom, the one that I shared earlier, one of my cards that I had made. Then we have happy birthday. You could try all kinds of amazing things with this happy birthday. You could just, because these two are separate words, you could use the word birthday in the die cut format and then use the word happy with a heat emboss sentiment. And same thing with the word happy. You could use this die in so many different ways. And then the hello word that I just shared. This card is made with this shadow word love. So the great thing about all of these die cuts or dies is the fact that they're 2 pieces, but they cut out 3 from cardstock that you try to cut out. So here's the example of the cutouts from the word hugs. So as you can see, I'm going to try to grab some piece of paper so you can see better. Here is the word that I cut from the hugs shadow word. As you can see, it cuts out the word, it cuts out the shadow, and it cuts out this pierced shadow outline for the whole. So you could use it kind of like this with just the shadow and the outline, or you could use all 3 pieces together and basically just attach them all together in place. So here's what it would look like cut out. And now for the best part. For the show special today, you can take 15% off of the entire SSBE demo collection. So like I said, go to craftymeraki.com, go for collections, and under collections, you will see SSBE demo products. and any product in that collection, you can take 15% off using code SSBEDEMO15. I hope you enjoyed the demo today, and I hope you will give this technique a try. I will see you all again soon with another project. Until then, stay happy, stay crafty. Bye!